I wanted to talk a little bit more about the future. My current role takes me mostly internationally with a bunch of other international telcos who are interested in healthcare, and with some of the bigger players around Amazon and Google and where they're going. So that's the kind of perspective I'm going to bring through this deck. And I spend a little bit of time, very little, because we don't have much here, just on the current context of the problems we're facing that were touched on earlier. So we all sort of know this is a pretty standard, right? All of our data for a long time, luckily we've gotten out of the silos within hospitals, and now we're just dealing with the silos between regions. Pretty soon it'll be the silos between provinces. And we keep escalating up the size of who we're trying to connect. But we've progressed a lot, but this is still a major problem, and that's hence the need for integration and the need for messaging. Around the world, we have got common problems that the systems in health are all evolving, right? And this is, again, just a characterization of the things we tend to see. And every healthcare system is at various stages of this, right? Moving away from this fragmented care, trying to accommodate the ability to move data across the system where it's needed, between all these different systems, and how do you get the messages to do so? But a lot of other things are driving our system, right? How people get remunerated, the ability to have virtual care. So all these systems, this is just the background trend, it's happening around the world. So everyone's accommodating this to a different degree. So now I sort of want to fast forward and sort of the things that are driving this. So we sort of see the fact that, this steady progress where everything is going to be connected. All the different devices, IoT, various pieces of the system, all the different pieces that are not even part of our traditional system today are all starting to feed out massive amounts of data. And you got another presentation on AI happening later, but this phenomenon is happening. It's all going to be digitized. It's got a whole bunch of new trendy words that are happening, half of which go right over my head. But supercomputing, quantum computing, AI, all the cloud-based pieces. This is all technologically pushing far faster than our political systems can accommodate, right? There won't be the policies in place to handle this because technology moves far faster than any one of our 12 systems can accommodate. So there'll be lots more friction. We've only just published the way to manage how your genome couldn't be used against you, right? That's a federal law, and the provinces will challenge it. Not that it's the wrong thing, but they will challenge it because it was not federal jurisdiction to rule on discrimination with genomic data. So we'll see more and more of that, right? But essentially, technology is moving down this path, and people are talking big data, and the major players around the world are sucking data up around the world to be able to capture it because they believe there's lots of money to be made on this. And they're not sucking personal information. They're sucking data that is not PI or even personal health information because it has value. So let me take this into the real world and give you a sort of a healthcare characterization of it. So Sally, it's a patient, right? She has asthma. She has a phone. She has an app. And that app connects to many different types of data sets, right? Not the typical type of data sets we're thinking about today in healthcare, but these are the types of data sets that are going to be relevant, and they're not personal information, right? Weather, pollution data, environmental sensors around the world in these smart cities that are capturing all sorts of relevant information that will be relevant to Sally with her asthma because she has an app that can use machine intelligence and a predictive algorithm that can predict her peak flows and makes recommendations for her to adjust her medications on a regular basis, right? And it learns as it does that. There's no reason why it can't learn. It has a feedback loop attached to it. It learns to keep her at work. It learns to keep her out of the emergency room. And it learns to teach her how to run her best marathon, right? That's no reason why we can't envision that future. And technology will get there far faster than our healthcare system can accommodate it. So one way of looking at this is, to recharacterize the types and ways in which we manage our data. And thinking about this, that everything gets digitized, all this different types of data well outside our current provider-driven system. There's an aggregation of that data and algorithms that crunch it and manage it. Some kind of a compelling user interface on your application that does this, that people can use to help you generate better outcomes. Right? Just a different characterization of the paradigm that we think of software today. Feedback loop to keep getting better. Like, we can all envision how this will happen. And the kind of insights we get today, which are barely predictive and diagnostic, will start to be therapeutic and prognostic. So that's sort of a future we can envision. There's 3 problems with that, though. One problem, simply that every application has to recreate all those elements to be able to solve their problem. And this is happening today. It's one of the challenges for startups. They have to recreate each piece of this, and they have to stay compliant in Canada with 12 different provinces, and even worse in the US, right? So how do you manage that? And they have to connect to all the different data sets, all of which aren't even health related. They'll be different. So great if we all adopt the same FHIR data set, but that's not where Environment Canada goes. And then there'll be different emerging data sets that are prohibitively large. In personalized medicine, around the Internet of Things, all these sensors that are out there in smart cities, they're massive. They don't fit our current data silos. They certainly don't fit in our provider domain. So those 3 problems, if you think about it, are going to produce 2 different futures, right? Every application is going to keep doing this, and we'll be really slow to innovate and adopt, and that's the current world we live in today. They don't scale up, and it's a real struggle to try and get these, and we are very slow at adjusting in our healthcare system. Alternatively, there'll be platforms that start to eliminate this friction and start to handle aspects of this, and some of those exist today. They'll get more mature. I think consumers are going to want these insights, and they're going to start to demand them. And they will choose to aggregate their data, and they'll consent to aggregate their data. We may or may not like what they're consenting to, and they may not realize the implications of that, but this will happen faster than we can deal with the political realities of it. And so I believe that these digital health platforms will emerge. Let's talk a little bit about what they are. So another way of characterizing people with all sorts of issues. I've sort of restruck the traditional system. I'll explain that later. But a platform helps to deal with the kinds of issues that people are facing today with their solutions. And they have to be able to handle, very standard elements of identity, privacy regulations, encryption. These are complex things for any startup or any new application to do. And there's no reason why common platforms can't eliminate that friction, help startups to focus on the real guts of what they do, right? So the kinds of data we're going to have to be dealing with and how the integration is going to work is a little bit different a phenomenon than what we're currently working with. So 3 roles for these platforms: to connect the types of applications that come out in the future with the services, with people with jobs that they need done. Creating a marketplace to be able to manage this. People who have things they want done, how do they find the right solutions and applications that will do that? They'll deal with the infrastructure piece here that's pretty boring. And how many people want to tackle 12 different privacy and security? HIPAA is different in every province in terms of their interpretation just on one aspect, right? And everything we know is quite different in every province. So who's going to play in that space? Who can solve that? And then the data access issues, right? 3 different roles for these kinds of platforms. And this is where your Googles and this is where your Amazons could easily start to play. You don't have to know healthcare to start dealing with some of these pieces, right? Amazon's traditional approach is to go in and change the retail marketplace and redo the model by owning pieces of it. They haven't chosen healthcare. Unlikely to choose Canada. It's too small a marketplace. But it wouldn't be long. The challenge here also is our traditional view of healthcare that most of us have spent way too long in the healthcare system. So I'm also very limited in my view. But our traditional view, let me just go through this slide. Our traditional view is all this piece. It's very provider-centric. That's where our original healthcare system was sort of invented in the 50s and 60s with all its legislation, when hospitalization was the biggest driver. We rarely capture this wellness piece. That's where all the global players are going. It's very, and it's too small a marketplace in Canada, but they're certainly expanding elsewhere. We start to think a little bit about betterment, but betterment is very much on the fitness side today, and it's very consumer-centric. But all 3 of these will get picked up by platforms. The platforms will start here because that is nothing to do with healthcare necessarily. It's purely on the fitness side, but it'd be very easy for them to evolve back down to healthcare because there's not much difference between them. So if it all sounds a little like the human element is missing, I think we certainly know what computers can be good at, right? And we shouldn't be trying to compete with that. There's no reason to do that. Healthcare, humans are very good at these pieces, and there's room in the healthcare system for us to start focusing on these. The last piece I sort of wanted to deal with, because I wanted to leave time for some questions, is just what can a telco do? And this is in the DNA of a telco, and this is what other telcos around the world are also thinking about. How do you build out these platforms that are open? Because Canada's way too small a place for it to be closed, right? Most of this is on scale that Canada can barely compete. So if it's not open in Canada where everybody's playing, you're not getting the 35 million population. And California is way bigger, so why wouldn't we just go to California, right? So it has to be open just to get the scale, and economies of scale to deal with. So I really wanted to present this as a way of getting our minds around the traditional approach of what data you're integrating between where and how, because it changes the paradigm. I'm going to conclude there and leave it open to questions. So I turn over to the next.
Yeah, thank you very much.
You're most welcome.